When that's one thing Baptist churches are so great at. They're like, oh, you have no talent? We're going to put you in the choir. Because everybody in the choir feels special. So
Lacey and I were part of a traveling ministry, and we would have what's called the 007 mic that did not have batteries.
Oh, that's so awesome.
Yeah, and we'd be like, oh, a little closer, can't hear you. But they were terrible singers. You just every once in a while, like as you're moving buttons, be like...
Do you ever worry when you tell stories that like that one person's going to listen to it and be like,
no.
S-O-B.
No, because I try not to give names. Like I try not to.
Yeah, but if you know, you know.
They should know. Welcome to Shoot the Breeze, a podcast that celebrates the messiness of life, relationships, and Christianity, featuring my wife Lacey and myself, Nathan. It's creatively titled because it will be just us shooting the breeze, sometimes with guests, while occasionally saying something important. We hope you enjoy.
All right, before we get serious and weepy, Chelsea and I got you this.
Oh my goodness.
All right, and you can't return it, so don't worry about that.
All right.
Should be a box in there.
Yeah, there is. I just didn't know where to put. Okay.
All right, make sure the camera can see that when it comes out.
Okay, ready? Let me move this. First of all, I see that it's a travel mug, which immediately no.
Oh yeah.
Okay. This is perfect.
I know.
Okay.
What did I tell you?
Okay, it is. Hold on. See if I can. Okay, it is a ghost riding a bike because if you've watched our podcast at all, I usually have the Holy Spirit represented as a ghost. And we're designed like a bicycle that the things that empower us are the things that like drive us, steer us. And it's supposed to be, our design is the Holy Spirit. There we go. And so I draw it with that.
Merry Christmas.
Here's why this is perfect on so many levels. Okay. First of all, Scott has told me he's looked for a present for me that has a ghost riding a bicycle. And he's like, I cannot find it. I can't find it anywhere.
I am going to say this. I do not believe that's dishwasher safe because I think those are stickers.
Yeah. No, usually they are. Yeah, usually.
I'm sure there's somewhere around here you could take it and be like, hey, can you just engrave this? I don't know how serious you want to get. But, that was some serious searching on Amazon. And I think Amazon's robots like look at your searches and then they reach out to China and they'll be like, hey, people are looking for this.
Yeah.
Because when I searched the first time, I found nothing. Okay. And then about a month later, I looked again.
And that was
on page 3. So.
Yes. Oh, that is, man. There we go. That's gonna be there.
A little product placement there for the slave market.
for the Uyghur camp.
Oh my God.
That is, I cannot wait to gloat. First of all, to Scott. Say I have better friends than you because they actually tried and found. I will absolutely use that tonight.
What a perfect concept to introduce the topic. That idea of if you just try it a little harder.
Yeah, right. All right. So, okay, we were talking. What is it that? Yeah, what is it that you were wanting to talk about? We were wanting to talk about.
So my first choice was absolutely Christian cults.
Absolutely.
And you shot that one down. So
I didn't shoot it down. I said that'd be a good one. I just haven't studied them in a long time.
Fair enough.
Specifically, Mormonism was, I would say, my expertise. I spent far too long studying it.
Well, and where y'all were, there was a lot more of it.
Yeah.
In Texas, they're very quiet. They hide their churches.
Yeah. In Alaska, they're pretty prominent.
Yeah. Honestly, that's the one reason I don't want to go to Utah.
It is a weird place. Yeah. So we went to Salt Lake City, like Mecca for Jerusalem if you're a Jew, Mecca if you're Islam. If you're Mormon, Salt Lake City.
That's the New Jerusalem.
That is. Correct. You just got to kill people who are already there, and then you'll be fine.
Well, I mean, That is kind of how.
That's how it. Well, shoot. Yeah, that's fair enough.
That's very biblical.
Yeah.
Anyway, but so that was a no-go.
Yeah.
So one that I think it just never gets old,
Okay.
whether it be for men or I think especially for men, is that father-son relationship, especially if you've had a difficult relationship. And some people, there are people out there that like their dad's their best friend.
Right.
And that's a type of difficult I can't imagine.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I can't imagine having so close a relationship because I would assume you get wounded easier like you would with a close friend, where like an offhanded word or something can really wound you.
But I don't know. It could go the other way where I have far more grace for my friends than I do my daughters or wife.
Sure.
So I could see it going
Right.
both ways.
But on the flip side, so I had a very
Tenuous?
I'm going to say strained.
Okay.
Because we in the very young childhood and to early adolescence, we had a fairly good relationship. And then due to some medical conditions, he went through and honestly, looking back now, I can be like, okay, he had zero male friendship. Mm-hmm. He had no one that could help him share this burden. He didn't pray with people very often. He isolated himself. So I can see now, looking back, how he got to where he was. But ultimately, he became a very untrustworthy person.
Yeah.
For about a decade of my life. And then as he got older, hit his 60s, mellowed out's not the right word. I think he just kind of let go of frustration. He let go of anger. He just accepted that whatever was going to happen was going to happen. And we were able to repair that relationship. But that decade in between, I think bears examination. And I know you have you had a really serious relationship with your father that you had to walk through.
Yeah.
For your behalf, not for the relationship's behalf, but for your behalf.
Yeah.
Or on your behalf. So I feel like that's a topic that doesn't wear out.
Yeah, and I didn't realize just with you saying that I knew some of your story. I guess I didn't make the connection to how similar it was where my dad would go through these seasons of anger and then go through seasons of apologizing for it, which is in a story on its own why I hate when people apologize. It's weird. It's a weird thing. I just want them to change. Like I don't need the whole sob story. Oh, here's why I'm sorry. I don't care. Just be different. That's my like ungracious.
No, I totally understand.
Nate, right? But it's because my dad would go through these seasons of like abuse, anger, and be like, "I'm so sorry. I'll never do it again." And I'm so sorry. So I'm just like, whatever. Every time he would call a family meeting, I was like, oh, okay, here we go again. Then in when I was in 8th grade, my dad went through a brain virus, herpes simplex 1 encephalitis.
Oh wow! That's the first time I'm hearing that one.
Yeah, and it like messed with his brain. Now, talking to the neurologists, we're like, hey, and he got really abusive, really angry, and we're like, hey, is this kind of symptomatic of the area of the brain that was hit? And the neurologist is like, no, that has nothing to do with the area that was affected. My gracious assumption is my dad struggled with anger, control, all of that. Is that when he got the infection, he kind of tapped out, right? He actually struggled, genuinely tried to fight against it, but then when he got the brain infection, he was just like, whatever. And my older brothers were out of the house by this time, so me and my mom got the brunt of it. And so a lot of my story obviously is from my high school years, the parts that I remember the most. Anyways, to your, I guess what I realized was similar was like, oh, your dad had something happen, and then my dad had something happen, and it kind of changed how they reacted.
Totally, and
yeah,
I was like, I don't know how your grandfather was with your dad, but like, so
he was like, my dad was a saint.
Exactly. So similar story. My grandfather, I had very little relationship with him on my father's side.
Yeah.
Not that he was, unsafe to be around. By the time that the grandkids showed up, he was a different person.
Yeah.
He really had become a much more compassionate man. Sorry, my wife was texting to say that her appointment canceled on her at 11, so we're good.
Yeah, Lacey got a migraine.
I wasn't going to say that, but
Well, it is. I know.
I know
who it is. You know who it is.
And now everyone else does.
And now everyone else does. Yeah.
But, okay, so my grandfather was an abusive alcoholic.
Yeah.
He had 7 sons. I guess they divorced when my dad was, middle school.
Okay.
He was the oldest. He was the smallest. He was the runt, but he was the oldest. So him and his first 2 brothers bore a lot of that. And interestingly enough, my dad forgave, but that relationship was never repaired.
Right.
The brothers younger than him, probably because, like I'm assuming Jeremy left as far away from he could, right?
Yeah, both my brothers.
Yeah, they got away. So that was my dad, right? He moved to A&M, went to school, and then went down to South Texas.
Okay.
The rest of his family stayed in the Houston area for the most part.
Oh, my brothers left states. And I mean, so did I. But yeah. I guess
it's 900 miles. I mean,
it's still Texas.
So it's like 2 Wisconsins or Michigans or wherever they're from.
Yeah.
So he went. Never, that relationship never really repaired.
Yeah.
And so he was very different from his dad. Corporal discipline happened, but it was extremely structured.
Okay.
I made the joke as we were going through the Proverbs. I think I told you, I'm not a big fan of Proverbs 3 because I used to read it right before my dad beat me.
What's Proverbs 3? Refresh my memory.
My son, listen to the instruction of your father. Basically, it's that list of as long as you do these things, you don't end up here.
Yeah, right.
Right? And so my dad would call my mom, or actually, this is the way it would go. Very early on in my life, my dad was a director for a city government in East Texas at the time. And my mom would call him and be like, this son has been so horrible. Mm-hmm. You will come home at lunch and beat him. All right.
Okay.
So already it's a bad day for him, right? He's going to come home.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, but once I got old enough, and so 8-ish, because I was a slow reader, the call would go something like this. Jim, when you get home, you're going to deal with your son. Mm-hmm. And then she'd put me on the phone and he would say, before I get home, I want you to read Proverbs chapter 3, and then we'll talk about it.
Oh my God.
And so I would read it.
It's less talking and more activation.
Was it? I can't remember. Was it one of the stand-up comedians was like, I used to hate it when my dad would talk to me before he beat me and be like, just get it over with.
Yeah.
That was absolutely how I felt. But it was extremely structured, and
Okay.
Almost perversely so. He put thought into it.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
So you got all the waves of emotion.
Yeah.
But then he had that. So when I was about 10,
was he ever one of this hurts me more than it hurts you?
Occasionally.
Oh, okay.
But that was
my dad never said that.
That was one of those lies we dispelled very early.
You know what? Let's switch places.
I'll get there.
Oh no.
So, relatively good relationship.
Yeah.
We did things. We would go hiking and hunting when we lived in East Texas. Really all of it changed when we moved here. And we've discussed this. I kind of associate everything bad with Central Texas.
Okay.
If I could just leave Central Texas, nothing bad would ever happen.
Do you Central Texas, can you explain geographically Central Texas?
Yeah.
Because I've heard there's East Texas, there's West Texas, but then there's West Texas.
Right. So. Okay. So Texas is it's so crazy because it's really 4 cultures.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So if you go, I'm going to say Taylor or Tyler. No, Taylor. Yeah. Taylor.
There is a Tyler too.
Right. That's way east.
Okay.
Taylor's other side of Georgetown, 45 minutes or so from here.
Yes. Yeah.
From there east.
Okay.
So if you go to Dallas Fort Worth and drew a line straight down.
Okay.
everything from there east is East Texas.
Okay.
And that is...
Would you say like 35?
No, not quite 35. Go like 25, 30 miles more.
Oh, okay.
Because Austin's its own biosphere that really can't be counted.
Austin and San Antonio.
Well, but yes and no to San Antonio, because San Antonio is just overtly Tejano.
Okay.
And they've totally embraced it, whereas Austin has always been weird.
Okay.
You know, that's their thing.
Wait, what's Tejano?
That is... Tejano is the culture group of Mexican citizens of Mexican ancestry that became Texas citizens by choice. So when we had our War of Independence against Mexico, there was the American Anglos and there was the Tejanos.
Okay.
I'm probably going to get corrected by somebody, but in a nutshell.
Yeah.
So that is Mexicans that were here that chose to be Texan rather than Mexican.
Okay. Did they fight...
Yes.
Against Texas?
They fought
Americans?
They fought against Mexico.
So it would be I'm trying to think of like so they fought against because you had Mexicans.
Well, just Mexicans.
Right.
I know the word gets thrown around here a lot because we do have a lot of people from Mexico that, because the river, right? Like people build civilizations around water.
Yep.
So when they were like, hey, the middle of the Rio Grande is the border, there was cousins on the other side like, hey, this is the same town.
Yeah.
Like, we call it Brownsville. It's Nueva Leon or Nuevo Laredo, whatever.
Yeah.
There's a town right across from Brownsville. That's one town. And they just divided it in half when they created the border.
Hold on. I want to pull up a map because I'm...
So, you had the Mexicans that stayed in Mexico, and then you had the Tejanos.
Okay.
Or Texicans. They were also called Texicans at one point.
Okay.
Either way, I don't know. So, East Texas, deep south.
Yeah.
That is plantations and Clarabelle and antebellum society. Okay.
Okay, why is antebellum...
Post-war.
No, but why is antebellum derogatory?
Because when you refer to antebellum, I don't think of it as derogatory because it's just Latin.
Okay.
But it came to represent a society of a defeated South. So that people that, quote, wanted to hang on to the pre-war South.
Okay.
So slavery, oppression, plantation lifestyle.
Yeah.
That is what people have come to associate it with. What it really is no progress.
So you're saying that's East Texas.
That's East Texas.
Okay.
West Texas that's the Wild West. That's cattle ranches. That's, the cowboy personality.
And you're saying that's this area?
Yeah, that's everything from like Llano.
Okay.
To me, Llano is still part of the hill country, but the Llano begins that's kind of like the center of what was the Comancheria, so the Comanche home.
Okay.
So that's West Texas. From there on, it was unsafe to go to.
Okay.
But it is, as it gets flatter and more deserty, the culture changes.
Right.
Right? It becomes a more, desolate personality.
And then there's like far east.
Far west.
Far west, sorry. Yeah, far west.
It's very New Mexican.
Okay.
Like a lot of Indian, like Hopi, Arapaho, Apache. A lot of influence like that.
Okay.
North Texas is essentially Kansas.
Is that Dallas North?
No, that's like Lubbock North.
Oh, okay.
Lubbock is the cusp, right?
Okay, what is that? What's that road there? Would you say it's that one, like the Wichita's to Roswell Road?
Yeah.
What is that?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I've driven it because I came from Roswell once.
Okay.
Into Lubbock. But either way, so yeah, there's like 4 biospheres or whatever.
Yeah.
And yes, that's like a really bad explanation. But anyway, how did we get on that subject?
So I know I totally
You just derailed me.
it was when you were coming you
Right. So East Texas is very different. It's green. First off, everything's green.
It's true.
All the time.
Everything from 35 east.
Mm-hmm. That corridor between Austin, Dallas, and Houston, if you go like north and kind of west, there's like a triangle there.
Yeah.
You got Midlothian, you got Mineola, the most fertile land in the entire state.
Interesting.
Most expensive place to live.
That is
because they're building suburb after suburb out there to support Dallas. It's terrible, but that's like the best farming and ranching land in the state.
Are they killing the industry there?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
There's very few operations in that area now compared to 20 years ago.
Sure.
But there is some resurgence in like dairies.
Okay.
Because the ground there produces just such great grass. But anyway, so moving here to, let's say, Taylor West to really Mason, that would be the east and west limits of the hill country.
Okay.
Because after Mason, you still have some rolling hills, but it levels out pretty quick.
Okay.
I'm sure people in Menard aren't listening to this, but if they were, they'd be unhappy.
Do they want to be central?
I mean, well, they're hill country.
Oh, they're hill country, yeah.
And that's part of central.
I've heard like a good explanation of hill country is like, what is it? Like Waco, Austin, San Antonio, like that sliver.
Yeah.
Is that a fair?
Yeah. Kind of right in the middle, but
like
slightly west of the corridor.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
So Texas is just weird. Anyway, so everything bad is central Texas.
Yeah.
And a lot had to do with my dad. I mean, we went from, at the time I was like, oh, he makes so much money. I think it was like $36,000 a year. But in 1994, that was a good living.
Sure. Yeah.
And we weren't well off. He was so bad with money. I don't mean bad like he was foolish with it. He just didn't really understand credit.
Okay. Okay.
It's not something he ever, like, once again, living in that deep South antebellum society that he was born into.
Yeah.
In the 1950s in East Texas, Houston area. Like, nobody had credit.
Okay.
Like, not in his family.
Yeah.
And they do now, but that just wasn't something he was brought up understanding.
Yeah.
And so he got in debt very quickly, coming out here to start a business. He retired, came here, started a business. And so I saw this man that had been, I'm not going to say he was ever hero status. He was just extremely admirable.
Okay.
Like, he was a craftsman. He remodeled the home we lived in. Certainly where I get that.
Was he, this is not to be derogatory towards him, but it's like you have people who are genuinely like, hey, I can do this, and it's a decent fix or a decent whatever construction. But then you have people who are like, oh, I'm a DIY kind of a guy, and it's like, okay, you're living under a tarp. Like, that's not
right.
DIY.
So I'm the second one. He's the first one.
Okay.
It's like, what is that? Is it A Few Good Men? Like, your mouth is writing checks, your body can't cash. I run into that. But he was, he just from a very young age, to avoid his father, he picked up woodworking.
Okay. Okay.
He could carve. He was always carving stuff.
Yeah.
And so he was a craftsman. And then when we lived in Conroe, he had this wood shop that was probably twice the size of the room we're in now.
Okay.
And he made whatever my mom wanted.
That's awesome.
French doors.
Yeah.
Hutches. He did a bunch of, basically he moved a hallway in our house so that it would flow better.
Yeah.
So he was extremely capable. Worked his way through college building houses.
Okay.
For somebody in College Station. So really talented.
Yeah.
And I obviously am not as bad as I like to make myself out. I do suffer with concrete, as it turns out.
That's your kryptonite?
I've never done a lot of it. And there's a big difference between patching concrete and, maybe pouring a slab and, I'm going to do decorative concrete. Like, it was so ambitious of a project.
My father-in-law wants to pour a slab next time he comes. He wants to do a walkway in our in front of our house. Mm-hmm. And so he's going to help me do that. I'm excited.
And you can borrow the cement mixer.
Yeah, I will have to. Yeah, I'll have to. I did concrete in construction for a while. That was
just now telling me this.
Yeah. I've done random construction jobs.
I almost exclusively did landscaping.
Okay.
And I don't mean like lawn care.
No, but don't you have to do concrete and like walls and stuff like that? Really?
I have hundreds of hours in like dry stacked rock walls.
Yeah.
That's what the company I was working for, that's what they did. Everything was like a natural landscape.
Oh, okay.
So native plants.
You're now just telling me this.
I don't want to do it.
Oh, I was like, dude, have
you seen my yard? Does it look like I like landscaping? I do just enough to keep the weeds from dying.
Keep the city from doing ordinance checks.
Exactly. No, but we did landscape architecture. That's what
Okay,
my dad
okay.
came out here to do. He was a landscape architect. And then we did installs, and he got into the tree spraying business. But back then, I guess people just didn't like understand. Like, it's huge now.
What's tree spraying?
That's where you spray against like oak wilt and the bugs that destroy the trees.
Okay.
Back then, like, it just wasn't a lot. People didn't do it.
Yeah.
And now he'd be making a killing. Anyway, so we had this business, and at some point, we had problems with houses where they lost their house in East Texas to the bank. And we ended up renting this house that I remember like 13 years old being like, why don't we just buy this house? And my mom's like, we will never buy this house. We bought that house.
Okay. Okay.
It's the one she's in now. And
Why did she not want to buy it?
it was like a 1920s farmhouse that had been remodeled 3 times badly.
Okay. So just a lot of work.
Just a lot of work. And we're still, obviously we're still working on it.
Yeah, you've just been doing like a year-long project of like plumbing and...
I know, yeah. I did all the water lines and started a bathroom remodel, and then I just ran into... I had to replace all the joists under the bathroom.
Ooh.
And
Okay. Did they rot out?
They rotted out, yeah. Okay. And so there was a lot of work to do that, and then re-squaring the walls, which I'm done with more or less.
How do you re-square a wall?
Well, so they would use that tongue and groove beadboard.
Okay, yeah.
And they would just cut it to length. And because of the way they put it on, it didn't have to have like... It's not structural.
Yeah.
Right? It's just slapped up on the wall. So as the house settled, they would move.
Yeah.
Because they didn't... They would literally tack up a little piece of 1x material here. Mm-hmm. And that's what they would nail into. But it didn't go all the way to the floor. Okay. So as one wall moves, it torques.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the corners...
So did you have to pull all that stuff off?
Yeah, I had to pull all of one side off and then redo it. And most of it broke, so whatever. It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
It's like 110 years old now.
Yeah.
So anyway, we lived there, and at some point around 2000, I don't really remember the exact date. I want to say it was 2000, maybe 2001. He had a stroke.
Okay.
And we knew that for very early on. Didn't feel good. Asked my mom to take him to the doctor. I think she found him laying in the yard. On it was Sunday after church. He went to do something, and she found him took him to the hospital. He had a stroke.
He had the stroke in the hospital.
No, he had the stroke at home.
Oh, okay, but then
he had a stroke.
Got it.
Partial paralysis, right side.
Okay.
Took never regained full.
And as someone who worked with their hands, did how much of do you think like his anger, frustration was because of?
Yeah. So right away lost his livelihood.
Yeah.
So at that point he had turned that business corner where he was making money. We had a lot of credit card debt still, but he was making enough to make the payments and still have an income.
Kind of starting that upward.
Right. And he was becoming known for good work, and we had a lot of business in Horseshoe Bay. Around that time, there was a big building boom there, 95, 97. And so, and then we were doing lawn care.
Okay.
And we continued doing lawn care for years because he could no longer do the installs and the architecture work. Mm-hmm. And he did architecture work for hire. Okay. And he never charged enough for it. He's kind of like, we have that friend in construction who's always like, I don't really know what to sell myself per hour. Yeah. That was my dad. He never really understood his own value.
I'm terrible at that too.
So years later, and I only recently learned this, he found out as he was going through the cancer that ultimately killed him, that he had a heart attack. Oh. That same week he'd had the stroke. And I don't know how they worked that out. But it was the two together. Yeah. One, the heart attack caused the stroke. Okay. Because it was untreated. Mm-hmm. He had a really bad diet. He drank like a 6-pack of Cokes a day. Okay. He didn't drink. That's all I can really say. Yeah. He didn't have that vice. He didn't drink. He didn't smoke. No tobacco.
Just caffeine. Just Coke.
Coke. God, yeah. By the bucket.
Just mass quantities of processed sugars.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah. And eventually he switched to Topo Chico, but he drank the still one. Like the no flavor.
Oh, yeah,
Just
I like
straight
that.
up soda water. Oh, and then he put lime in it. I'm like, Dad, they sell one with
Do
lime.
yeah.
They're like, it's not the same. I'm like, all right. So that event is what changed everything, right? So
Yeah.
I'm entering adolescence, very early into adolescence, and this guy that has always been like the leader, the provider, the protector, is suddenly really incapable,
Right.
and I'm having to do a lot of his. I kind of looking back, I can see it with more perspective. I'm doing a lot of his work.
Yeah.
Which I know would have frustrated him because I was not him, right? So I can't do it the way he would have done it. And, as the things start to compound, so he's lost the use of his right side.
Yeah.
For the most part. Used to play guitar, like finger picking, Chet Atkins kind of guitar.
Okay.
Could not do that. Never played again. Flatly refused because he didn't have that control.
Yep.
And, of course, I was like, if you played, like, you might get some of that back.
Yep.
And anyway, it was the whole thing. So from like 13 to 21,
Yeah.
that relationship was non-existent
Okay.
because he became extremely short-tempered, extremely abusive. So he's mad at the creditors.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know this, but like in Texas at the time, they could call and threaten you like every day, all day.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
we would have like 30 messages a day for the creditors. And they passed a law against that.
Yeah.
So you can't do that anymore. But like abusive stuff, like we're going to take your house and put your kids in an orphanage, we just horrible stuff.
We're going to beat them in front of you.
Right. I mean, it was.
I already do that.
So all this is going on. And then you've got like a 13-year-old boy.
Yeah. Which, I mean, that's adolescence, hormones raging. Like, that's all its own issue.
Right.
Anyways.
So you know me. I'm not
Yeah.
that different than I was then. I say things I shouldn't.
Very, very quippy.
I'm quippy. I'm sometimes witty even.
Depends on which side of the...
Sure. And my mom is just like me.
Okay.
And that's who I spent most of my time with.
Okay.
Actually, she was working at Walmart at that time. So she picked up a job, which was a whole other thing.
Yeah.
'Cause she had never worked in their whole marriage.
How much disappointment do you think that fed into your dad as well, that my wife has to
tons.
work? Because your dad's a like traditional man goes to work.
I don't know that he was traditional in that sense, like this is the way it should be,
Yeah.
but this is the way it has been. And now it's not because of me, is I think more probably what his mindset was.
Which deals with value, which deals with worth and
Right.
and
So
importance.
you
Yeah.
take all that
Yeah.
and then you remove that male friendship.
Yeah.
That encouragement that, hey, God has a plan, much like the guys group, much like the way we still meet and talk with each other on a regular basis. He didn't have that.
Yeah.
There were men that he was friends with.
Hold on though. What I understand about that generation, especially, because I think your dad is probably just
He was like the Vietnam generation.
yes.
So he was 18 in 1968.
How old would he be today if he?
75.
Yeah. So he's like right at my dad's age. That generation, they did not. As I've talked to people, they did not have intimate relationships with other men.
Right. It's that leftover World War II mindset.
Yes, there was no vulnerability, and I think that is one of the factors that like my dad, because he wouldn't share struggles with people. He was a pastor, so it's like he had to have his stuff together because he's the pastor.
Right.
And so he had this great facade in public, but then privately, massively struggling with stuff. But I guess I'm saying all that to say, I don't think it's like your dad's issue. I think that was a generational issue.
Right. And I don't mean to say like he did that intentionally, but that self-isolation
Correct.
was a mindset he
Correct. Yep.
had. Now later which is okay, let me withdraw that a little bit. He had some male friendships, very close friendships that we all went to church together. We did life very much kind of like we do now.
But do you think?
And when you put 400 miles between people, like those relationships die.
Yeah, but even I don't know, man. I would say it's far more rare, and your dad may have had that relationship with those friends when they were together. Mm-hmm. But man, I think what I see in the church today, with male friendships, I don't know if that was normal back then. That vulnerability, the, hey, I'm really struggling with this. I need you to pray with me. Just in terms of what I've witnessed. Now, I'm not saying across the board that never happened. Maybe your dad
rare.
had that, but it was
So
rare.
there was, they had a relation. There was about 4 of them.
Yeah.
That they all worked in proximity to each other.
Okay.
And they did have a very close relationship. How close? I don't know exactly. Is it the relationship we have?
Yeah.
Is it something similar? It was very close in that time and place.
Correct. Yep.
And he had one that was extremely close. I'd known him for years, and they had a falling out.
Okay.
And over all kinds of stuff. This guy, wonderful man. I mean, I know he loved my dad as a brother.
Yeah.
But he had a very what you would now call reformed view of everything.
Also known as wrong, but go ahead.
And it definitely soured the relationship over years. But my dad...
That's a joke for all you reform people. It's a joke.
They never gave up on each other.
Yeah.
Right up until his passing, they would still talk. He reached out to me one time shortly after my dad died, and to my discredit, he really made me mad. And I never talked to him again.
Okay.
And he has since passed on. Which, whatever, that's my fault. But he was my dad's friend, not my friend.
Right.
So, so all that to say, he didn't have an outlet other than personal prayer. And I know he prayed with my mom. They were very close. And he was not a reformed man.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys actually grew up pretty charismatic from what I understand.
Considering where they both came from.
Right.
Southern Baptist, Methodist, Baptist.
Yeah.
Whichever church had a place you can dump your kids off of, is I think where his parents took him.
Okay.
But he believed in the full gospel.
Yeah.
In the presence of the Holy Spirit, and the power of the Holy Spirit. He went to one of those camp meetings where you fall over.
Yeah.
I guess he fell over.
Okay.
And that changed his life. Whatever actually happened.
Yeah.
That was way before I was born.
Yeah.
So I grew up with that. So I had this idea that God loves me and he's there for me, and I have all these problems. But my representation of that became very abusive.
Yeah.
So at some point around 13, it changed from, maybe 12, it changed from discipline, honestly, to an outlet.
But that's what I'm saying is, right? Like, how much of that? Okay, I have a struggle on this side of freedom.
Sure.
Probably giving too much grace to people, but it's like when I look at my dad, all I see is things that he must have struggled with, where it's like, no, I totally understand why he did what he did, right? Obviously, as a high schooler, not my view.
Oh,
right. But no, this is what I mean is, yes, your dad had those connections, like you said, with your mom, but that's not how we're designed to live. No. Just individually, like, the classic personal salvation. Yes, that is a truth, but that's not maybe the ultimate truth. And that's where, like you're saying, he lacked that community of, I don't want to say accountability.
Well, and coming out here into a Baptist church.
Yeah.
Like, and I talk a lot about the Baptist church because that was my experience. I don't want to knock the Baptist church because they're very good at some things, and they do make a huge difference in a lot of lives. They're particularly good at children's outreach,
children's and missions,
widows,
study. Those three, I think, are the big.
So it's an organization that I don't disagree with.
Yeah.
However, small town Texas, Baptist churches are extremely cliquey.
Yeah.
period.
Most churches are.
And if you're big enough, there's a lot of cliques.
Sure.
When you're 125, 130, there's
The
like
church,
two.
The church is the clique.
Right. And so we were never in the clique. We never made enough money for my dad to be considered for deacon.
And you guys moved into this town.
We moved into this town
Yeah.
because my grandparents were here. My grandfather retired as a principal, came up here to the lakes. We don't know why. We have no idea why. He hated everything. Hated water sports, didn't like being on the boats.
hilarious.
He didn't want to travel. He just wanted to watch football.
Okay.
That's all he did.
Was there a good football program here?
No. But actually, no, in reality, my great-grandparents retired out here.
Oh,
But
okay.
they stayed when they died, which is like, why, dude?
Well, he's probably like, whatever, I'm not moving again.
That's exactly what it was.
Okay.
Because he got all the sports channels. He watched basketball, football, baseball, basketball,
he's happy.
football. My grandmother was miserable. That poor woman. I have so much empathy for her now. So anyway, I don't want to dive into like my personal whatever, but I do want to skip ahead to 20 years old.
Okay.
So at 20, basically his body had balanced again.
Okay.
We no longer had the extreme rage,
Yeah.
and his blood pressure was through. I mean, he'd be like, they'd check and they'd be like, well, you're dead.
Yeah.
So, medical mystery here.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so all that had leveled out.
Yeah.
And he'd come to terms with where he was at that point. He'd been diagnosed with cancer.
Okay.
So, just the gift that kept on giving.
Yeah.
And
He won the medical lottery.
he did from birth. Actually he did.
Goodness.
Kind of a funny story. I know he wasn't ashamed of this.
Yeah.
But it's something he dealt with, and that when he was actually in 1969, he had to drop out of school
Okay.
because he couldn't afford another semester, so he had to work for a while. And in that time, he lost his deferment and was drafted to Vietnam.
Okay.
And he went into the Army, medical they call it MEPS now, right?
Yep.
Where they test you and decide what you're going to be good for. And they were like, you can't serve in the Army.
You could be fodder. No, I'm
Right?
just
No, you can't even be fodder.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're going to get somebody killed before you get there. Just everything was stacked against
Yeah.
him. So he did get to skip Vietnam, and that was like the last thing his health did something nice for him.
Okay.
So around 20, they had a Christmas where he's walking through understanding of what he'd done to his children. He had driven away one of my sisters because, don't get me wrong, very similar to one of your daughters. And he did not have any grace for it, right? And so all these issues with his children.
Yeah.
And of course, me and him, very tenuous. I mean, we still did things together. I still lived with him. I didn't come to him with problems.
Right. Right.
And so we had a friend of my sister's over, so it was really kind of embarrassing. But he was like, at the end of the Christmas morning, he was like, we got one more thing we want to do. It's kind of cold. We had a fire. He's like, hey, we're gonna do what I'm calling the burning of the board.
Okay.
And we're all just like, what? And he had taken, I think I told you, this 3-foot piece of one inch oak that he had carved into a paddle.
Okay. Yes.
Like this thing's the size of a baseball bat.
Yeah.
All right, and it's about a 1/2 inch thick, roughly sword shaped.
Did it have holes in it for aerodynamic?
No holes. He was, when he made it, he was
Yeah.
not quite as into discipline.
Okay. Okay.
He made that when I was like 6.
Okay.
Like he decided, I'm going to wear out my belt on this kid.
Might as well make something that'll.
And so I think he used that on me until I was like 13 and a half. And at some point he was like,
This is not.
well, I was looking down at him and I was pretty angry.
Yeah.
And there was this like, why am I don't have to submit to this anymore. Like, I could probably take him. And at that point he had a stroke. He was way weaker than me. I would have gone to prison, right?
Yeah.
For elderly abuse. And I think it clicked with him. Like, I should probably stop doing this. So that ended, 13-ish.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what he was really good at. That man could let fly with a backhand.
Yes.
So fast. And it was like a movie. He'd like get you double. He'd get you back and then he'd come back and get both sides.
Yeah.
And that became his discipline of choice.
Okay. Okay.
because it was so sudden. You know, you have that. Did you just?
Yeah.
You did. But I mean, like, he regretted all that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like your dad, he never came back and apologized.
Okay.
Because it was discipline.
Yeah.
Because he loved you.
Right.
Right? Spare the rod, spoil the child.
Of course.
Very intimate with that one. So he's cut up his paddle and he gives everybody a piece to burn.
Okay.
And so this is when I realized I had an issue for the first time.
Okay.
I was so upset. Because to me, that was him admitting that he'd done something wrong.
Okay.
Which he had never done before.
Right.
And I was like, hold on. I let you do this to me because you said it was right and you loved me.
Yeah.
And now you're telling me you did that for years and it was wrong?
Right.
And so that's when he apologized to me. When he realized, like, I think he realized just how dangerous the situation was because it was one of those things like, I was angry enough, I could have snapped his neck.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was absolutely strong enough to do it.
Right.
But I was so trusting of him. And this is where we've talked about like how the Proverbs are really frustrating because it's like A equals B gets you C. Except it doesn't.
Yeah.
It could. It's really like it might. It's not a bad idea.
Have you know the proverb raise a child in the way they should go and when they're old
23 something?
I hate when people quote that to me.
Yeah, I know that one well too.
Because it's like they're like, you know, the reason I discipline my kids is cuz you know, raise a child in the way they should go. And it's like, yeah, you're also abusive to them, so guess what you're also training them as.
Right. So that's the mission statement verse for KOZ. But we're way more on the
grace.
The love side.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was this big moment where I was like, you have wronged me for decades. Or at that point, not decades, 15 years.
Right.
And him and my mother, because she let him.
Yeah.
Right? She's not a small woman. I mean, and I don't mean like she's a large woman. I mean, she was a foot taller than my dad.
Okay.
You know, and I only remember her intervening one time. And I mean, it was to the point that it was like, I wasn't going to be able to walk.
Yeah.
He had just lost his stuff.
Yeah.
And so they both were like, oh, we're sorry.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
We didn't know any better. And I'm like, all right, stick that one away for later. Right. So that's the relationship background, right? And then when I got married at 22, that's when I realized how much I needed my dad again. Because I was coming up on all these problems in my marriage. And he was so gracious. And he told me not to marry my wife.
Yeah.
He was like, you probably shouldn't marry this girl. She's so sweet. I like her. You probably shouldn't marry her. But I did.
Yeah.
And then he was so for that relationship.
That's cool.
He was like, you chose this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now you have to trust that God is going to carry you through this.
Yeah.
And he did. He absolutely loved Chelsea. And for her, her dad is a stepfather, and I know he cares deeply for her. Not great at affection. Yeah. And that's just, probably some autism there. So he's a genius. He really is. Over explains things, but he's a wonderful man. But so that was her first, I think her first experience in a very long time with a father figure who was kind, affectionate, considerate.
Like emotionally present.
Emotionally present.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's what saved our marriage.
Yeah.
Is that man's constant prayer with us, prayer for us.
Yeah.
That he loved Nick. Nick spent so much time with him.
Yeah.
So that was my relationship with my dad, was this very, good, traditional father-son relationship in the best Ward Cleaver kind of sense.
You're right.
Into a abusive relationship.
Right.
And then finally into a man that was like, I'm sorry.
But that's the hard part, is by the time he saw what he had done.
Yeah. Years of that.
You had already been like, I'm done.
Right.
Is that like a fair?
It was like, so we 17 to 20.
Yeah.
Don't ask, don't tell. That was the policy.
Yeah.
You know, his one rule, I feel so bad for my sisters. They had curfews. They had all this stuff. When it was my turn, he was like, if you're going to be late, call me.
Yeah.
That was it. And so I'd be like, 9:30, Dad, I'm going to be late. And I just wouldn't come home.
Okay.
And I moved out at 19, which, it's for very specific reasons.
Yeah.
None of them good.
Yeah. Yeah. So you don't have to call anymore.
No. It's an offline story. Okay. But basically, I got tired of my mother's helpfulness.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
And snooping.
Yeah.
And I was like, whatever.
I don't need
this in my life. And there was a hardness that developed in me that I still struggle with, because there's a certain part of me that accepts that. I think I told you this before with Nick. He 16ish got real flippant with his mom, dropped some language that was just totally inappropriate. And when I went into his room, I don't know how I looked, but it was enough that my wife like ran up to me and was like, no, I got this. You don't need to come in here. Don't do anything.
Yeah.
So there was this genuine fear. Like, I think she thought I was going to hit him.
Yeah.
Which I'm not opposed to spanking my kids.
Right.
That has never been my go-to.
Right.
Like, I just, like if I get out of belt, you have crossed so many lines.
Right.
Like, it's like the Germans rolling through France. Like, you chose this, pal. But what I instead is, I just got in his face.
Yeah.
And very quietly pushed him across the entire room with my fingertip. And I let him know that I could destroy him.
Right.
And that if he ever spoke like that again, I would.
Yeah.
And it was this understanding that I am totally capable of ending your existence. But I love you, and I'm choosing to let you grow.
Right.
Right. And I think that is somewhat healthy. Like, you need to have that understanding that your father can do that. But you need to see the restraint that he doesn't.
Yeah.
Right. So my dad had lost that restraint ability.
Right. Right.
So his, whatever started discipline was going to end as abuse. And I've maybe gone too far the other way and moving back center as I've had more children. But with Nick, I was totally... Actually, with Nick, Chelsea wasn't like, no spanking, timeouts only.
Yeah.
And then we got to Raylan, and she was like, beat this child. And I'm the one that's like, no, we don't do that in this house, you know. So around that time, I have this relationship with my dad that's growing again.
Yeah.
And he is, they'll never listen to this, so I'll tell this story. There was this bassinet that had been...
My daughters do listen to this.
Now, this is not... That's not what I'm talking about.
Oh, okay. Okay.
No one in our circles.
Yeah.
There was this bassinet that had been in my wife's family forever.
Okay.
And Chelsea's, Nick's father got drunk, broke it. And she'd been hiding it from everyone.
Okay.
In a box, all the pieces.
Yeah.
And so when we got pregnant with Weston, of course, everyone's like, oh, you can use the bassinet.
Right.
And she's like, I need you to rebuild this. And she had one photo and all the pieces.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. So I did what every man does. Hey, Dad.
Right.
How do you use a router? I'd never used one. I grew up using, I'm very accomplished with hand tools. I didn't use power tools. And that's what saved our relationship, was rebuilding that together.
Oh, interesting.
And experimenting, trying to get the scalloping. It was so ridiculous. And trying to get, I had a friend at the time who was a contractor who graciously agreed to stain it for me, and he matched the stain. It was almost identical.
Nice.
Minus the aging. And so there's certain members of the family that have never been told.
Have no clue.
They have no clue.
Yeah, yeah. That's hilarious.
So, but him doing that for me, and he invested a lot of his personal time in cleaning up all the pieces we were able to salvage.
Yeah.
And that's, I was like, okay, so I understood that he loved me he was willing to sacrifice for me. You know, that restarted that rebuilding process. And, you know, unfortunately, it wasn't until after his death that I was fully able to forgive a lot of what he's done. And there's still things that I have to deal with, as Lacey likes to remind me, like, you're going to have to go deal with that, Phil. I'm like, one day.
One day.
Or I could just die. You know? So my relationship is unique to me, right?
Yeah.
But that's not a unique story. I've
Yeah,
come to realize that this is the tenuous relationships between father and sons. It's like everybody.
I've learned as we're in a freedom ministry that people's stories, the details are always different,
Right.
but the emotions involved are always the same. And it always comes down to 3 to 5 similarities. And I think, you know, what happens like in stories is people want others to identify with the details. Mm-hmm. And that is a unrealistic expectation.
Yeah.
And I think that can build offense rather than, hey, I want you to identify with this emotion. That is always possible, right? That was one of the biggest things Lacey struggled with when we got married is people wouldn't understand just disease stuff, cystic fibrosis. And she's like, oh, they need to understand. I'm like, good luck. Like, that's a terrible, now, feeling abandoned, feeling rejected, feeling whatever. Oh.
Betrayed.
Most people can understand that.
Well, yeah, being lied to.
But yeah, to your point, I think with guys, yeah, right, we have dad issues, and it's so funny because have you ever ran into someone who's like, I had the perfect dad?
Oh yeah.
And I like, as I hear their story, I'm like,
yeah, sounds like it's because you don't know each other. That's why he's perfect.
right.
And then you meet, you know, it's don't meet your heroes, right?
Or the opposite is, no, they coddled you and you got everything you wanted. That's why you think he's a hero.
Right.
And it either
Yeah, absolutely not my dad.
You know, no. But what I'm saying is like, I don't know. I think people who are like, yeah, my dad beat me and almost cut my head off. It's like, okay, we can walk through some stuff. But people who are like, my dad was great, I immediately know this is going to be a hard one.
So I don't know what went wrong in my life in the sense that I love biographies.
Yeah.
And I think
Why is that?
No.
I like to read and be intellectual.
I apologize.
I don't know what went wrong.
That statement didn't go with the previous one. That was me thinking through it myself.
Got it.
I love biographies. So when you read about pretty much anyone who ever made it in the special forces,
Yeah.
they came from an abusive household. There's a few rare ones.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so like I fit the profile of somebody that should have done that.
So did serial killers.
Right. I mean, that was my other option.
You're right.
And instead I went into retail.
Okay.
So I needed that abuse.
Okay.
Oh no, in real life. Like, and I've told you this before, like on my worst day, I'm like, I want to go back to Egypt.
Yeah. Yeah.
In that sense that I miss the ass kicking.
Yeah.
You know, it's that constant, we're all about to die unless you get this done.
Yeah.
And in reality, it's like, we're going to lose a lot of money unless you figure this out.
Yeah.
And I was really good at figuring out that need to be needed was so real because it had been absent.
Wait. What do you mean absent?
Well, so like with my dad, I felt like I was just in the way. Unless he needed to beat someone daily, what point was my existence?
But I would, trying to think of how personal did I get. I don't know. I think in light of your dad not being present for your family, you had to become that, and that's what you learned as a survival.
Oh yeah, I mean that's a whole nother.
That's what I mean. Is like
Right.
I don't know if it's not because you didn't have it. I think it was a coping.
Probably.
Coping.
Whatever. It would.
Yeah.
That need to constantly be in crisis became an addiction.
Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. This is one of the many resources we make available for free at our website, cultivaterelationships.com. Our resources have helped people grow in their relationship with God and others. We've seen people set free from uncontrollable anger and paralyzing fear. We've witnessed estranged family members be reunited after working through our freedom booklet. We've helped people build healthy relationship and coping habits through our coaching videos. And all of these resources are made available for free because of the generous support of people like you. If you would like to become a partner, please visit cultivaterelationships.com/support. Now, I hope you enjoy the rest of this episode. So what, in light of your relationship with God, how have you had to, how have you resolved that?
Yeah. No, I just haven't. I just want to talk about, no.
I just want to.
So, okay, yeah, skipping forward many years, right?
Yeah.
This relationship repaired. We mostly forgave each other. Because, there were things that I did that were just, I wrecked his car. The only new car he had, I totaled it. Doing something. It wasn't stupid, but it was stupid. Anyway.
Okay.
And I always so I really felt bad about that. But whatever. Moving on. When he died, I felt cheated by God.
Okay.
Because, he was given that cancer diagnosis. You got 4 years. He lived 8.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And I was like, but you were supposed to heal him. Right? That's what it says.
Yeah.
And hundreds of people over the years prayed for him.
Yeah.
And we've discussed this. Chelsea and I are part of the Freedom Endeavor, and she went to the healing training.
Endeavor.
And I struggle with going to those nights.
Yeah.
Because I struggle with belief. This is, I don't want to be the reason that, I don't want to be the lack of faith that caused somebody not to have a healing experience.
Thankfully, or unfortunately, it is up to you. So that's huge. Yeah.
Right. It doesn't have to make sense, Nathan. Whatever. So when he passed, it left some things unresolved that he and I never talked about.
Yeah.
We never walked through. And then, of course, right after that, my marriage fell apart more than it always had. He was a huge piece of keeping us together, it turns out. Maybe it was just for my sanity, having that voice to talk to.
Yeah.
But for years, there was kind of a silence.
Yeah.
Where I was like, okay, I've got to make all these decisions myself. And I can talk to God.
Yeah.
There's no expectation he's going to talk back, because that's not how he works. And so there was this one-sided relationship where I yelled at God and then I walked away.
Yeah.
And so 2021 hits, we start coming here in the late 2020, and I'm running a lot at night specifically. And I found out this park, you could get murdered there, nobody's going to notice. A pack of wolves could tear you apart. Nobody will notice. Because I would literally scream prayers while I was running. I was so angry at everything.
Yeah.
And I came across, during that period, as I was listening to the Bible as I was running. Yeah. Job is not great for that. I'm going to throw that out.
That and Ecclesiastes. those two.
Oh, man. Yeah.
You'll want to put a gun in your mouth.
I went through Psalms, Proverbs, Kings, Samuel. I really had a blast in Samuel. But I came to this verse, and we were looking for it before. And I think it comes from the Psalms 82, and I'm just remembering it incorrectly. But basically, David's like, I'm going to call you Father. Yeah. You're going to be my Father. And this was a brand new concept to me. Yeah. And so I started reading about this idea that growing up in the church, that your father on earth is a representation of your father in heaven. So, of course, I was like, well, he's an asshole. Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah. He's a jerk. Let me say it that way.
No, but those are the real prayers.
Right. Yeah. And so, but then I'm like, well, why would David want to call him Father?
Well, look at Jesse.
Yeah. Well, and you have this
Jesse's David's.
You have this much to look at, and it's like, oh, we had one negative thing to say about Jesse, and we moved on. Yeah. We all have that uncle.
No, but it's true. You think of it. You have God's anointed coming to your house to say, hey, one of your sons is going to be the next king. Bring me all of your sons.
Right.
And the only one not brought to him is David. To me, that says something about their relationship.
Yeah. And there's,
right?
Obviously, the more you read scripture, there's a lot more to infer about that relationship.
Right.
So, but I read that verse and I'm like, why would David want to call that entity father? Right.
Sorry, thoughts are processing. Number one, you have Jesse, terrible dad.
Right.
Oh, to David, at least.
To David.
Saul, who I would argue was his kind of like proxy.
Yeah, no, and that's where I would take it next, right?
Yeah.
Because obviously Saul brings him into his household.
Yep.
And then he goes through rejection.
Yeah.
Essentially, Saul walks through rejection, and I can relate to Saul. I can.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it's my personality. Like, if you watch The Chosen, Shmuel.
Yeah.
I get that guy. 100% get it.
We're supposed to follow the law.
Absolutely. You know, I told somebody once, I was like, there's a reason. Like, I always thought I was born in the wrong era, right? You know, but I was like, if I had been born in the 1900s, I totally would have been a communist. Like, because I have read, you know, a lot of the early biographies on some of these guys. And I'm like, yeah, totally get it.
Yeah.
Would have done the same thing. England was horrible.
Yeah.
So, you know, what makes this entity better than my earthly father?
Right.
And I, you know, God, right?
Yep. Right.
That's what I'm talking about. But I struggle with, I struggled with that concept because it's like, God is love, God is good, you know, nothing better. And I'm like, I have some anecdotal evidence that suggests.
Exactly. They may not be empirical. But
shortly after that, right, as I'm going through this, my very good friend Jonathan and I reconnected after 12 years of almost nothing between us. Whole other story. And when we were in high school, his father left his family. Mm-hmm. And so I was telling him about reading this verse, and he was like, that is what carried me through.
Yeah.
You know, so I guess, I don't know if he found it on his own or one of our mentors at the time showed it to him, and he was like, that idea that God is my father.
Yeah.
That my earthly father is the surrogate. It's not the other way around. Your father, God is not a surrogate for that father relationship. My biological father is the surrogate for the relationship with God.
Yeah. He's the steward.
And that there's so many pieces of information that I'd never read in the Bible in the correct context that began these little micro revolutions in my entire being.
Yeah.
Kind of culminated when you invited me to start coming to the guys group.
Yeah.
And I realized that this whole Christianity thing is a little more graceful than I thought it was. Because I was like, this guy's reckless. You know, what's that song, Reckless Love? Like, this guy's reckless with his grace.
Yeah.
You know, you got to earn it.
Because that's what grace is. Earned.
Exactly. I mean, it's, you know, it's unearned. But you got to earn it.
But you got to earn the unearned.
Right. I mean, were you martyred? So I start reading about this, and you start reading, you know, stuff in, I briefly brought up Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, which I got stuck there for so long.
Yeah.
But, you know, Paul is like, hey, he is your father.
Yeah.
He is, you know, he is all these relationships. He is all of it. He's your father. He's your mother. He's your brother. He's your sister. Right.
Yep.
And I think for a lot of men, not just me, like the counseling thing. Like, I've counseled 2 men with Jim, and not that many more have signed up for counseling.
Yeah.
Like, I'm assuming. I know I've been asked for 2 others that I was unavailable to do so.
No, it's true. Men don't.
They don't.
Yeah.
We've got it figured out.
Yeah.
Or
there's no. So there's one right now that I'm. His wife is coming in, and we're like, hey, you guys should do counseling. And the thing is no, we're not that bad.
Right.
And it's like, how it doesn't have to be a train wreck for you to get advice. You know, before it's a train wreck, maybe you should get advice. If we didn't
call it counseling, it would probably be.
But here, no. Hold on. When you read in the scriptures, David had counselors. When you read in the scriptures, in the multitude of counselors, there's wisdom. When you read that the Holy Spirit is the counselor, why are those positive? Right? I would argue those are positive, but then it's like, oh, I got to go see a counselor. It's like, oh, are you guys getting divorced?
Once again, connotation, right?
But and that's why we specifically called it counseling, because I want to change that precedent.
Right. And if that idea of we're not that bad, there's two schools of thought there. One, it's I don't want to take that spot from somebody who needs it.
Yeah,
that exists.
I know. No, I know.
They're genuine men, right? But then the flip side of that is that person's going to air my laundry out, and you never can. You can't. Yeah. It's for most men. It was true for me. I had to be in crisis.
Yeah,
the first time.
Yep.
And I mean, a lot of people are so comfortable with the idea of divorce.
Yeah. Yep.
It's normal.
Yep. It's like plan B.
It certainly was normal for me.
Yeah.
Like it was always an option. And there was at one point,
which is here's the juxtaposition, the hypocrisy in legalism is how many times legalists justify what they do.
Right. No, I'm great at that.
And I'm not saying this is to Phil. What I'm saying is,
could be.
Back Nate Steele, pornography addicted, yet other people had to be perfect. You know what I mean? Like, we justify so much.
Yeah. Well, and okay, so back to the dad thing, right? I could give him grace. Mm-hmm. And because he loves me.
Yeah.
Right. He tells me he loves me.
Yeah.
And that's why he abuses me. Right. And that is that I don't know, there's a word for it.
It's the Stockholm.
It's not like Stockholm, but it's in that it's a mental conditioning.
Yeah.
Brainwashing.
Yeah. Yeah. Christian brainwashing
is totally a thing.
Totally.
Okay, so if you haven't, I know I've sent you his stuff, but there's a guy on YouTube called The Holy Nope.
Yes.
He's hilarious.
Yes.
And
there's some of it where I'm just like, that's hilarious. There's some where I'm like, knock it off, dude.
He does do a podcast.
Yeah.
That is
very
reformed.
Yeah, exactly.
So he did one the other day. He's like, what's a lie you totally grew up with in church? Mm-hmm. But isn't in the Bible. And so I was like, I jumped on that. It's like 5-point Calvinism. I was like, nope, I don't have time for this today. Because I'm, if you reply to me on a post, it's on.
Yeah, bring it. That's hilarious.
But and so that legalism trap, and that's what's so strange. So my mom has always been super legalist, much better now. Mm-hmm. But when you're a child, you automatically assume that your mom is the soft one and your dad's the hard one.
Yeah,
it wasn't that way.
Okay,
I learned that later. My dad was always the gracious one. But his wife is bringing complaint against his children.
Yeah.
And he dealt with it the only way he knew how.
So he had to be the hard one.
I think circumstantially had been different.
Yeah.
Things would not have gone the way they did. I mean, obviously, right? It was not his plan A to become an abusive father.
Sure. And I would argue most aren't.
Oh, yeah. No. I mean, I think it's a very select few human beings that enjoy beating their children.
Yeah. Okay, so how did you get to the place, I'm just going to use this word, but how did you get to the place of being able to call God your dad?
Difficult.
Okay.
It was a long journey.
Yeah.
And I still don't call him dad. I tried it once. It was weird.
Did I tell you? Have I told you the story of why?
You have told me, but it's so applicable. Why don't you tell it again?
So, this is just maybe 3 years ago. By this time, I'd processed, a lot of stuff with my dad. Genuinely, I would say our relationship is reconciled. If you know my mathematical equation for reconciliation or offense, our relationship is reconciled.
Right.
Forgiveness, repentance has been exchanged. And so just like 3 years ago, I'm praying and I'm struggling with my own stuff. Just walked out of a year of depression. And so me and God are walking through kind of a reconciliation process as I'm resolving disappointment in my life. And he goes, from now on, I want you to call me Dad. And I'm like, nope, that's weird. Like I'm leading a freedom ministry. I'm been reconciled with my own dad. So it's not like I even have a quote issue with God being my father. Anyways, I'm praying one time and he's like, I want you to call me your heavenly dad. And I'm like, hard pass. Because there's like charismatic movements that are like, oh, daddy God. And I'm never doing that. Never will I go daddy God. Yeah, it's a recliner, man.
Yeah, I'm too tall for that.
I was going to say, I just got that chair, so I'm excited to take a few naps in it. No, anyways, so he's
donor-supported missionary, folks.
Yeah, right. He's talking to me. He's like, I want you to call me Dad. And I'm like, I'm not doing daddy. I don't want to do that. It's so awkward. And I remember the very first time I did it publicly, where I'm like, all right, Dad. And I said, okay, heavenly Dad. Like, that's where I landed. That's where I'm comfortable with that. So awkward to me, though. Yeah. But what's interesting is Romans, is it 8? Where he says, I've put in you a spirit that cries, Abba, Father.
Oh, yeah.
Abba is an Aramaic term for dad, daddy. Like, literally, it's daddy. Like, and I had become okay in my own processing of my relationship with God and my dad, my earthly dad, calling him Father.
Right.
More maybe a title, right? Like you would say, yes, sir.
Romans 8:15.
Okay. More like saying yes, sir, Father, title. But he was doing something in my heart during that season of intimacy with his heart. That when he said, I want you to call me Dad, like that's the relationship that I want with you, is you've never had a dad before.
Right.
And so it is interesting. I mean, some of the things I get made fun of are different slogans I've had over the years. Recently, it's things that God has intentionally told me to do. And it's not because I'm like, Daddy God, I'm starting to cry now. But it's not because it's like I'm goodness. It's not because it's something that I want to do. It's things he's forced me into doing.
Right.
Because he's like, Nate, this is what I want with you. Like, this is the relationship that I want. And anyways, it is interesting how things that I'm forced to do then become like, okay. I mean, everyone makes fun of me, right? Like, oh, Nate prays Heavenly Dad.
So I am so anti whatever's cool and like I joke about, I love to get my clothes off the discount rack, but it's the understanding that I'm never going to find this thing again.
Yeah, right.
Like if it's going to fit great, and there'll never be another one.
Right.
If you're listening, Academy, you can just fix that.
You can do something about it. That's funny.
So I didn't have that issue where I didn't have a dad. I'd had a time period where I had a dad.
Correct. Yeah.
And God restored that.
Yeah.
We were able to do, we did carpentry together in the 18th century style.
So cool.
And we were able to travel. Him and my mom traveled a lot doing that with the Texas historical sites.
That's awesome. Okay. I didn't know that.
He and I did one here in Burnett at the little fort there.
Yeah.
We used to do, every year we'd do that. Fort Croghan, yeah.
Croghan, yeah.
And then we had one in Fredericksburg we did, and one out in Mason that we went to. And just my work schedule, that's what I could do. But they were big events, multi-day. And pretty much all my children, except for Garen, got to participate. So we'd go in costume, and we lived there for a couple days. And the last one he and I did was in 2016. Of course, he passed away in spring of 2017. So that relationship was restored.
Yeah.
Where I was given as many bad years as I had. I was given essentially the same number of good years.
That's cool.
You know, of course, as he was getting ready to pass, you know, he kind of gave me that great commission of, he's like, you know, he understood that I believed in God.
Yeah.
And that was the extent of my faith.
Yeah.
At that point in my life, I just walked so far from it. You know, my wife and I were essentially living separate lives. She was in school. I worked nights. And as part of the business I was in, the lifestyle was, okay, when you get off work, you drink. And so I would go out till 2 or 3 in the morning. And I was not like out looking for women. Like that was never the issue. But I was just completely separate from my wife in my lifestyle. And so he was, you know, almost the last words he ever said to me is, you know, Philip, you have to get right with God. And I'm like, okay, what does that mean?
Yeah.
How do I do that? Is there instructions?
Give me the to-do list.
So for me, it was, okay, get my kids, and we're going to go back to the Baptist church. And Chelsea was like, no, we're not. I don't think she ever came to when we were going there in Kingsland. She came one time in Burnet.
Yeah.
And nothing against the Baptist church in Burnet. They're wonderful. It was just not her. It was everything she thought religion could be.
Right.
And of course, ultimately, she starts sneaking over to this church. And
the Greasy Grace Church.
I know, right? And I was like, oh, that pastor, he's preaches the same sermon every Sunday. Whatever the topic is, it's the same sermon, right? But I had made that commitment to God, right? So it's part of honoring my father, which was a huge part of my life. That's the duality here. As much as we had that bad relationship, the legalism in me would not let me ever
dishonor him.
I never talked about my dad. To anyone. All right, because that was it.
Yeah.
Like, whatever the deadness between us, irrelevant. This is my dad.
Right.
Nothing but good things.
Yeah.
So the very fact that I can even bring up anything negative about him is a huge step. Yeah. And that was that pain that I walked through when I was running and like, okay, you are supposed to be my father. How did you let all that happen?
Right.
And it's not until I began walking through the grace to understand what he was going through.
Right.
All right. Not absolving him, not just skipping over that he had done wrong, but that how broken his spirit was in that moment, in those moments, in those years, the absolute helplessness that he felt. And then he's got, you know, a 13-year-old who's just
going off the rails.
Just a walking mouth.
Yeah.
Really, I'm lucky I have teeth.
Even with your wife today, I'm shocked you still have teeth.
I know, right?
You both could hold your own.
We're so similar. It's not even funny. But and then understanding the importance of that relationship. So the uncomfortable things that I've been asked to do. The first one was to we were going to this ministry thing on Sunday nights, and it was very charismatic and it was kind of popular. Popular people went there,
okay,
but we weren't popular.
Yeah,
as I saw it. And at some point after we got to know everybody a little bit, and you know, I was like, what is my next step? And God was like, you're going to ask this person to disciple you. And I was like, no, I'm not. And then I made the mistake of telling my wife about this conversation I'd had with God. And, you know, this guy did all the weird stuff. You know, he'd make you pray out loud and repeat after him.
He called God Dad.
I know.
Weirdo. That
was so bad. I was so upset the first time I heard that.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. I was like, does he just not know who he's talking to?
There is no respect in that.
Exactly.
It is, sir. It is.
So, as part of this, walking through, understanding my dad, forgiving my dad,
Yeah.
learning who the God is I actually profess to serve,
Yeah.
especially reading the Old Testament, which I loved reading the Old Testament.
Wow.
I mean, Leviticus is riveting. People that don't think of it that way probably don't love God.
We just had a text talk. We did had okay, so I'm going through the Old Testament in the Septuagint, and I'm trudging through Leviticus, and I texted you, and I'm
exciting.
like, oh my word, how do I stay awake?
I know. I think I texted you something like, I used to listen to that before going to bed. It would keep me up. But it was so fascinating to me. It's like, hey, if this animal touches your food jars, break them.
Yeah.
Disease control. It makes so much sense.
Right. Anyways.
I found it fascinating.
Yeah.
Found it fascinating. But I went through it and I was like, oh, gosh, this all makes so much sense. And then I made the decision around that time, 2021, 2022, to do something I'd never done before. And that was, I'm going to read the New Testament in the order that's laid out in most Bibles. I realize it's not chronological.
Right.
It's really just a super convenient, longest to shortest layout in most of them by author, right?
Yeah.
Letters of Luke, letters of Paul, letters of Peter. And I'd never done that before. Mm-hmm. And I skipped the Gospels. I was like, I know this story.
Okay, wait, hold on.
But I didn't, right?
Hold on. I need to pause. I have to go to the bathroom real quick.
Oh.
Well, I'll be right back.
Did it all come out all right?
Okay. Actually, no. I don't. Okay, you know when you have to go so bad that when you undo your belt, your muscles no longer have the...
No. I don't have to undo my belt.
Anyways, my belt broke.
Oh, no.
I need a new belt. The spring.
Is this your, one that's been cobbled together from all the little extra pieces?
No, this was a brand new belt a couple of years ago. One of my most favorite belts because it doesn't have holes, so you can adjust it exactly how you want it.
Oh, it's one of those ratcheting belts?
Yeah, and it just broke. The spring died.
Oh.
Anyways, I was undoing my belt apparently too frantically, and my belt broke. And apparently the belt was also acting as a tourniquet.
Oh. So you passed out and peed all over yourself?
I don't want to talk about it. What were you saying now?
Okay. So as part of the things that I had to do,
Yeah.
that I didn't want to do was, I asked this guy to mentor me, and that was weird. And he made me do all kinds of weird things.
Hold on. But I want to back up because I think I've shared this story with you. Did I tell you, you had come in to the guys group. Mm-hmm. You and your wife had started attending Cultivate.
Right.
Then you'd come into our guys group that we were doing.
Yeah, I got the tap.
Whatever. So right before that, and now I'm talking about maybe a week or two before that, we had been super vulnerable, super emotional.
Right.
That was our trajectory, which was great, But 2 weeks prior to that, I felt like God going, you need to start studying Revelation and doing kind of intense Bible studies. Stop with the emotion side.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's what we do. That's our freedom ministry, right? So I did, though. I was like, okay.
Right. Yeah, you have told me this before.
Yeah. And so we're 2 weeks into a Revelation study, and that's when you started coming.
Was it Revelations?
Yeah.
The first one I remember was you talking about the Nephilim.
Oh, maybe that's what it was.
I think it was just cool oddities is what we were doing.
And then we went into...
We did, shortly after that.
So I had no clue why. I had no, okay, this is weird. I was cool with the...
Yeah, if I'd come into y'all crying, that would have been one time.
So that's exactly my point. A few weeks in, then you would ask me to disciple you, and just us hanging out as friends.
6, 7? It was a while.
Yeah.
I would say 6 or 7 months.
I put it together.
I wasn't going to say you but
That's fine. I put it together. No, this is like the fun side, the other side of it.
Right.
With trusting where God's leading people, you trusting God leading me is I specifically remember going, oh, Phil had to trust. I think what it was is I had to prove myself like spar worthy, I think, with you.
yeah, probably.
And I think that's what it was, because it's like once we started, I call it sparring,
Yeah.
but like you and I would banter back and forth on Bible verses. And it's like, I think once I was like,
Basically, I think for me it was like,
quote, at your level.
well, maybe because
Yeah.
you're not. Respectfully.
No, but I think I had to prove myself that before you would trust me emotionally, I had to be trustworthy scripturally.
Right.
Is that a fair?
What's the foundation
Yeah.
of your,
yeah.
of, okay, you're saying all this stuff, and I've heard this stuff before. I've been in many youth groups over the years.
Right.
Right. When I was a youth, I want to be specific.
That's a whole other podcast.
But yeah, it's like Scott, right? I think, because, obviously that's who I'm talking about when I say he preaches the same sermon every week. You do, Scott. But
There's
3 years in,
yeah.
right, I had this, I see what you're doing.
Yep.
There was this realization, that yes, it is the gospel message every Sunday, which there's nothing wrong with,
Yeah.
right? It's boring. World salvation. It's boring.
For those of us who are mature,
Yeah, those mature, like, where's the wrath, Scott?
us, them.
Can we? Yeah, we're all forgiven now, but what about the hard part? Let's talk about that. But there was like 3 years in, I was like, I don't remember what he said. It was a Wednesday night. He said something, and I was like, in total agreement with, and I was like, the back of my brain was like, we don't agree with that.
That's too nice.
Where's the wrath in that statement? Where's they didn't earn it. And it was at that moment I was like, oh, Scott played me. He's been brainwashing all of us.
He's been playing
to love people.
He's been playing 7D chess this whole time.
Oh my gosh. And I told Chelsea, and she was like, yeah. Like, okay.
You just figured that out. Yeah.
She and I are our humor is so far apart. Like, it's so funny. We're so alike.
Yeah.
And so different.
Right.
We can read the same information, and I'm like, that's a right angle, and she's like, it's oblique. Like, what's wrong with you?
Right.
But anyway, so yeah, but it was the years of attending Wednesday Night Live, of briefly attending his life group before somebody home wrecked it.
Home wrecked it?
Pulled it apart.
Oh, yeah. I see. We call it multiplying.
But he established his credibility.
Yeah.
Right? And that was the way I think it was for you. You had to establish that credibility of, I know Scripture.
Yeah.
I know how to interpret Scripture, right? And I hate that word, because everyone's like, the way I interpret Scripture. And I'm like, it's not the way you interpret it.
Yeah,
it has to be a consistent interpretation.
No, and I think that you and I agree.
Right.
There is no my interpretation, your interpretation.
Yes.
There is only one interpretation.
Right.
Application.
Application
is where we can differ.
So through that whole process, so God prepared that way.
Yeah.
For you, and honestly, Lacey was such a big part of that too.
Well, your and Lacey's stories are so mirrored.
Right.
Just in terms of you're bent towards responsibility, you're bent as you being the oldest son, not the oldest child, but the oldest son, her being the oldest child, dealing with responsibility, all that.
Yeah, because I have an older sister, and we have a mirrored lifestyle.
Yeah.
Went different directions, but that sense of duty, responsibility, whatever you want to call it, heavy upon both of us. So, maybe 8 months in to coming to Cultivate, we're sitting there, and there was a couple with us that used to come, and I was talking, like I'm advising him on a relationship with his father, and I said something. I don't remember exactly what. And Lacey's like, so when are you going to deal with that, Phil? And I'm like, no, I'm good.
Right.
Are you? Are you good?
Yeah.
And she said something else, and it's like, I think you need to go and do a freedom book on that. And I was like,
You're a woman. Who are you teaching?
well,
me?
no, but I was like, I'm not going to do that. And she's like, why? And it was like, she was dropping these one-word sentences that were just pregnant with judgment. Not judgment. That's not the right word. Authority. Right. And I was sitting there like, I was getting emotional, like angry, not necessarily at her, at the situation. Like, I'm helping the guy to my right. What are you doing? And so, right.
It's not about me. It's about him.
Exactly. So, and then of course, right after that, I think I talked to you about the time. You're like, well, maybe it's time to do a freedom book on your dad. And I'm like, oh, is it? So, I did. It took me 2.5 years. I don't recommend taking that long.
Okay, so recently Lacey had to do a book.
Oh, okay.
And she, for all the talk and authority judgment that she has, I always joke she's our worst leader because she hates doing books. And so recently, it's funny. Not that I love them, but I'm like, hey, let's get this over with. As soon as I start a book, let's just hurry up and do it. But yeah, recently she had to do a book, and she was talking to me, and I'm like, man, babe, that sounds like the book that you need to do. And she's like, no, it's not. I'm like, I mean, it literally is what you have to do it on. It took her like 2 weeks to even start it.
Yeah.
She told me about the prayer that she had with God where she's like, I'm not doing it. And God's like, you should probably start it. And she's like, I don't have a pen. And she looked over and there's a pen right there. And she's like,
oh yeah.
No.
So I hate doing them. It's an awesome tool that you could honestly skip most of the steps.
Hold on, I want to clarify. I just want to put it in context.
Specifically 7, 8, and 9.
Most of the biblical steps?
No, that's not what I don't mean like that. Like, once you become familiar with it, you can literally pray it out.
Yeah, and I actually tell people that, like, hey, this is not because you've memorized a tool. It legitimately is the gospel being played out in your life. It's funny, Phil, I've worked with 4 other freedom ministries, trained in some of them, just worked with others. And essentially we all have the same forgiveness process.
Right.
Because it's biblical. And so that's what I mean by it's not because you've memorized the freedom tool from Cultivate Relationships LLC.com. No, minus the LLC.
Oh,
okay. It's because this is the gospel. And you're right that as you start to get the gospel inside of your heart and it becomes your character, you shouldn't have to sit down with every little offense.
Right. So, having said that, I can't skip steps because I'm disingenuous to I overlook things.
Yeah.
As most people do. Like, that wasn't that offensive.
Yeah.
It was just my birthday that you decided to move our whole household across the country on. No big deal.
That's all.
Never saw my friends again. Whatever.
But you loved us, so it's fine.
Right. I can't skip steps because I realized with the first one I did.
I don't think you can skip steps on foundational offenses.
You can't.
Yeah.
It turns out for me, when it opens up, like, that emotion takes over, I write so specifically, and I'm like, I don't even remember this happening.
Yeah.
It just comes out.
Yeah.
And so when I did the book on my dad over a 2.5 year period, and maybe it was 1.75 years.
To be fair, we do not advocate for that. So if you're watching, look at my eyes. Do it quicker.
So the first one I did with, about my mom.
Yeah.
And I did that like 1.5 hours. It was so fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you should not do a book where God is the offender. And
you can.
You can.
You can. I mean, obviously, by the end of it, you
The book
realize...
says not to.
Well, you
But it's
realize...
like, if you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's honestly, that's where I got stuck.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I could not let go of that anger at God, that father who had betrayed me as I saw it. And so I had to grow in maturity and understanding and in grace to myself. And I'm not an advocate for self-forgiveness.
No, but I think it's opening ourselves up to receive God's grace.
Right. Exactly what I mean.
Yeah.
It's this idea that the same forgiveness that God extends to everyone else is extended to you.
Yeah.
And just because you have admitted that you have, I've been a sinner, come live in my heart, the old prayer, that grace didn't stop when you accepted that.
Yeah.
But there is a certain amount of, well, I'm a Christian now, I can't be offended.
I should know better.
I shouldn't sin anymore. All these things post-Christianity, it's just not a biblical,
right.
That's the goal.
Right.
John. Right.
That's the trajectory that we should be on.
That's the trajectory, but it's not a overnight. Yeah. For some people it is, and God bless them. It wasn't for me.
Yeah. I would say, even that statement, I think it's something we call it miracles, right? But not in every area of everybody's life. There are absolutely miracles that do take place. Like, I have a friend who was an alcoholic and boom, overnight, no longer an alcoholic. Didn't even have the taste for, or the desire for alcohol. Great, that praise God. I would argue, and he's said this, there's new habits he had to build. Because he could go back to it.
Oh yeah.
But that initial,
Right.
But those are miracles.
So, didn't have a miracle.
Yeah. Yeah, neither did I.
Right. So
for my
me, Lacey, you, we're process people.
Yeah.
Chelsea's a miracle person.
It's so frustrating.
She's like today, she's meeting with some ladies she knew back when, because one of them asked a scriptural question, and she was like, "Yeah, actually, I can answer that."
That's cool.
And they're like, "Oh, well, could we do a real conversation where we meet in person and talk about scripture?" And she was like, "Oh no,
what have I done?"
Well, right? But she's doing it, and there's so many moments for her like that, and I'm like, it's just not fair. I've done this my whole life, and people still are like, "Oh, I don't want to ask his advice. I mean, he's taller than me." That's not true, right? I have good friends that we do have scriptural conversations with, right? So 2.5 years to do this one book, and it was because I wasn't mature enough to land on, but you're good.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately where I had to get to, is my Heavenly Father, right? And a distinction that came up, right? You say Heavenly Dad.
Yeah.
I landed on Father God, and that was actually my dad's prayer. He was never, he might have said Heavenly Father once or twice, or, Almighty God. He was not really big into those kind of big prayers. It was always Father God, that specificity. And I realized that the very thing that I walked through was what he must have walked through.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is ultimately what allowed me to turn that corner.
Yeah.
Forgive him, let go of the injustice that had been done against me, and release any obligation I was holding on to with God.
Yeah.
And so then I was able to, I feel this way.
Right.
But since I know that's not your character, I'm asking you to take this from me.
Yeah.
And that's how I was able to finish the book. But I couldn't get there for a long time.
Right.
Because there was no relationship.
Yeah.
There was zero relationship between me and God outside of a supplicant asking, here's my offering. I'd like a good harvest. Right. See you next year.
Right.
That was very much my reformed view of God.
Yeah.
And I refuse to put that off on any one church or any one person.
Yeah.
My lack of pursuit of God was my own business.
Right.
Now, were there some foundational
I think that's
tools that I was given? Sure.
Yeah, and I think that's what happens is we forsake relationship for the idol of God's sovereignty.
Right.
Well, he's in control, so I'll just defer.
Yeah.
Or he's in control, so obviously this was his will.
Right. It becomes a passive ride as opposed to a partnership.
Yep.
Junior partnership. I like that better.
Scott and I just did a podcast on this. No, it's like 50-50 partnership.
49-51.
No. What I mean is 50-50 in that we are empowered by the Holy Spirit. I'm not saying, Phil, by yourself, good luck, go do this. Right. What I'm saying is, as I submit to the Holy Spirit, he uses me and moves through me, which is a willingness on my part and an active movement on his part. I don't know how I got on that. But yeah, I think that is a huge, and you and I just recently had a conversation about this, about that, defining God being good. What does that mean in our life? And so many things in my life have predisposed me to questioning God's goodness. That definition of goodness. Yeah, right? And
a lot of disappointment.
And I that's the thing that less and less, I think the more I walk in freedom, less and less am I having to have that conversation with God. But it has been a theme in my life of going, I don't define what this is as good.
Okay, so you've said you're a crisis Calvinist.
Yeah.
All right, and I'm just like, in the back of my mind, still one.
Just general.
It's there.
Yeah.
It's there. And I have to struggle against
the house is built on sand.
It is. Oh my gosh.
But no, it's that.
So in crisis, I'm charismatic.
Okay.
Right. That's when I have those serious emotional prayers. I'm like, God, I'll try to speak in tongues if that'll make you happy.
So you're a crisis Pentecostal.
No snakes.
No, but they believe in like tongues and
so do the charismatics.
No, but Pentecostal is like,
yeah, I'm okay.
Especially holiness Pentecostal. You're a crisis holiness Pentecostal.
Well, maybe.
Where you have to do the law and speak in tongues, which is part of the law, and then God will respond.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. Righteous lifestyle with Holy Spirit, that's where I am in crisis.
Yeah, that's a holy, that's a holiness.
I'm a worm, but you love me anyway. Should have bought a Honda.
Because you...
Right. But
I love that. Yeah.
And so I have to be so intentional with that relationship pursuit.
Yeah.
Because I get busy and then I don't.
Yeah.
Like I was saying, I'd never read the New Testament all the way through. Guess what? Still haven't.
I
stopped in I got through Galatians, Ephesians. I stopped in Ephesians and I got busy. But I also felt like that pressure to do it was gone.
Yeah.
There was a certain amount there was something there for me, specifically in Corinthians, where Paul, because that's
you were in Corinthians for
a long time. And I think what I had to learn there was because of course the famous Corinthians, right, is talking about the order of the church, and then judging people within the church. And
12 through 14 is roughly that area. Yeah.
So weirdly enough, I got stuck in 11 for a long time, and part of it was the way I was note taking on the way I was reading it.
Yeah.
Like I rephrased every verse.
Yeah, but I mean that's
to the point that it was like, this is Philip's version of Corinthians.
Right.
I don't recommend that. But it did help me to process it. And what I think really what I had to learn there is I didn't know anything about how the church was supposed to be ordered. Yeah. Because as we began to have conversations about, the way verses are broken up is not necessarily the way they were originally.
Right.
And so sometimes there's thoughts that are separated that really should be together for the full context of what's being said.
Yeah.
Specifically on this, I think it's like, what is it? It's like women be silent in church, and then,
as it is in all other churches.
In all other church, but then it's like it pauses. And it's like he's, to me, very sarcastically says, because the gospel was given to you first.
Yeah.
And I'm like, he's digging on him.
Yeah.
A little bit there. And and I think it gets taken out of context a lot. I think there absolutely is an order in the way.
Well, no. Here's what I found is there's verses that say maybe a lot of what I believe, but it's not the verses that have been cherry picked.
Sure. Yes.
And that's my frustration.
Misrepresented.
Yes.
So what I think was going on there is it was breaking the ideal of the church order that I had grown up with, that I had wholly invested in.
Yeah.
Because I remember, like, when Lacey would teach, there was this idea that I had a problem with it, specifically with my wife, and I'm like, no, I really enjoy it when she teaches.
Yeah. You. What's hilarious? Now you've asked me. You're like, hey, so can Lacey teach more?
Yeah. Well,
I like her stuff better than your stuff.
I don't think that's entirely fair.
No, it's
what it is I think that the dynamic that God has put you two together for.
Yeah.
You know, you balance each other so well when you teach together. And I do enjoy Lacey's teaching because we have such a similar background.
That's the thing. That's what I was just going to say.
Very relatable.
Yep.
But the two of you together are just so enjoyable. It's like a comedy show with God.
Dude, you missed the marriage conference, man.
I missed it every year.
We knocked it out of the park.
That's awesome.
We played a Key and Peele video, which
one?
Okay, here's the funny thing. I had several that I wanted to play, and Lacey's like, "There's too much swearing in that one. We can't do that one."
Sure.
So found one that didn't have swearing in it, and it's the jailer. It's the guy who.
Oh yes, you told me about this one.
Yeah, but it was funny because when I had people come up to me afterwards, and I had two streams of people who came up to me afterwards. One was Nathan's playing Key and Peele. This should be good.
Right.
Like I tend to push some stage boundaries.
Sure.
Probably that I shouldn't. But then the other set of people who come up and be like, I've never watched Key and Peele before. Now I want to watch everything they have. And I'm like, oh, no. Hold on. It was the one video that didn't have it.
The very first one they ever did is my favorite. And it's like the only one there's not a good copy of.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
And it's like, it's very grainy, like on YouTube, because it was literally somebody recorded it off TV on like a video camera.
Oh, that's
But it's the guy who, I don't remember which one's which, but the one with hair.
Okay.
Is like calls the police because somebody stole all his drugs.
Yeah.
And then, like, his house is full of all these felonies, and he's like, where you been, Hutch? You know, he's like dropping all these like cop show references.
Yeah.
It is. I think it's the very first one they did.
Okay.
It's my absolute favorite.
Yeah.
It's like they need to redo it. Anyway, so understanding the church order was something completely different than what I thought it was. Is what I think was being shoved down my throat. As part of that whole process of re-understanding who God is.
Yeah.
The relationship, him seeking the relationship, him being that father figure. Not just a father figure, but like the perfect father figure.
Yeah.
And that, like, as I, doing the KOZ volunteering, I've gotten to do the devotional the last couple times, probably because I just somehow avoided it for a year and a half.
Yeah.
And they're like, hey, who hadn't done it? But it was super enjoyable because it was like, okay, how do I take this concept?
Yeah.
I got 15 minutes tops.
Yeah.
And it has to be, edible. Like these boys have to be able to, and they're boys, right?
Right.
And so I kept emphasizing, you got to wait on God. You got to, and I said, when you're waiting on God, you're not silent. You're praying. You're praising. You're studying the Word. That is what waiting on God looks like. And that very concept is so different from 10 years ago. It's like, well, I'm waiting, God. Where you at?
Yeah. Yeah.
I've been on the playground for a while. Nobody's pushed me yet. So getting there, that was a whole process. But it ended and began with my dad.
Yeah.
And I think for most men, even the ones that are like, my relationship was super good, to I don't have a relationship.
Yeah.
There's a lot of self-awareness out there.
Yeah.
And that's usually the one place men are not self-aware.
Yeah.
Is I need to examine this.
I think that's both a frustration and slash understanding I have is men are so confident. That's not a bad thing necessarily. At the same time, our inability to ask for help, how many times does that shoot us in the foot? How many times does that... And again, I think you're kind of going back all the way to the beginning of our conversation of why are we so afraid to seek counseling? And I think it's because counseling means there's things that are wrong in your life, and I'm a man, I should fix it, I'll do it myself. To switching that perspective to, no, actually, biblical counseling, having a counselor, having a multitude of counselors is godly. And I would argue even how we're designed, that our lives are supposed to be made up of other people,
right?
Spirit-filled, speaking into our life.
Once again, going back to Corinthians, right? Living in the community with each other. When you have a problem, get more people involved.
Yeah.
Right? That's total counterculture.
Yep.
And then pray without ceasing. Yep. Right? Men are terrible because at some point we all have this idea that we're going to get down on our knees, which I totally advocate doing from time to time.
Right. Right.
In that reverence position. But sometimes it can just be, I have asked God how he's doing today. I've really never gotten an answer to that question. But, it can just be, what do you think about that?
Okay, so even...
I'm struggling with this. What do you think about that?
Even less structured than that, Lacey and I just had a conversation about this, where her and I were talking, and someone on our team has been on our mind and just kind of thinking through it. And she ended up meeting with this person and just had some wisdom for her in that space. And she gets home and she's like, man, I wish I would have prayed about that. And I'm like, hold on. We're kind of in this discussion where it's like, wait, I'm a Christian who has the Holy Spirit in me. If I truly believe, like Peter says, my thoughts are his thoughts. I have the divine nature in me. It's a hard verse, especially for Reformed people, because it says, I share in the divine nature. It's a rough one. It's like, wait. Anyways, I'm like, when I'm thinking about someone, and I'm saying intentionally thinking about someone, is that not the same as praying? Is that not the same as communally? So let me,
tough.
Hold on. Let me give you a very real analog to this. Lacey and I, we can look at each other from across the room when something's happening and have a whole conversation and not talk. Right?
ESP.
Have you and Chelsea had that moment where you look at each other and you're like, you know exactly what they're thinking, they know what you're thinking, and you're having a conversation. Is that not the same in our relationship with God when I'm intentionally thinking about someone, something, right? And isn't that prayer? Isn't that a conversation?
Yeah, what I'm stretching me a little bit here.
No, but what I'm trying to dispel is this idea of every single time I pray, right? Pray without ceasing. I have to be on my knees in supplication. Yeah. And what I'm saying is I think prayer is this massive spectrum than what we've maybe been taught.
What's the literal of prayer?
Huh?
Like, what is prayer actually?
Like,
like we say prayer.
Do you want me to look up
Logos that.
Logos. I like that. Logos that.
While you're doing that, I'm going to back up a little bit to this idea of counselors. Why do men have a problem with it? I would say 99.9% of all men have a problem with counseling outside of the beer joint. Like the bartender's the one person that everybody can talk to. At some point, their opinion, their concern was so completely invalidated that they said, well, I'm not doing that again. And that's where that son-father relationship comes in. Because at some point, you're going to bring something to your dad, and it's the wrong moment. And he's like, he shuts it down. And I've done this to my son, and I have to go back and say, I'm so sorry. I'm never going to care about Minecraft. But I do care about you.
Yeah.
So tell me about it.
Yeah, right. What is it? I love you, so I love what you love kind of an idea.
Yeah, that's not happening. But I love him enough to sit through it,
Yeah,
even though it's
yeah.
boring.
I have a daughter who tells stories, loves to tell me stories about a book that she's reading.
Yeah. Well, since you don't read fiction, that's almost like watching a movie.
No. Let me I don't think you understand the way she retells the book story.
Oh yeah.
It's the way my mom tells a story. So the way my mom tells a story, Mom, if you're listening to this, I love you so much. She'll go, I was driving to Walmart. No, it was Menards. No, I was on my way to a store. And I remember stopping at a stoplight. No, it was a stop sign. No, and there's a person.
Oh my God.
So that's the way my daughter retells the book.
I just heard a comedian. It was like, it's like the way men and women tell you events. Mm-hmm. It's like a guy will be like, oh, I had a flat on the way home from work.
Yeah.
Whole story.
Yeah.
And your wife will be like, oh my gosh, it was 3:37. No, it was 3:35. I looked at the clock. And just what you described.
Yeah.
But also, that's the way women process.
Hold on. So this is where it gets into me now.
Okay.
Where because I was trained by my mom, so I find it annoying. I find it my daughter annoying when she does it. But then I'll be on stage. I will be teaching. And I'll be like, so let me give you an example. When I was 7, no, I was 11. Yeah, because my dad.
And super frustrating.
And Lacey's done this. You've heard her do this. Go, Jolene, stop. Like,
so what's the Jolene?
Jolene's my mom.
Oh, okay.
Jolene's my mom.
Wait. Is she the Jolene?
So, if you see my mom, which she's coming for Christmas, if you see my mom, you should be like, Jolene, Jolene, Jolene.
So I have a sister that's Jolene.
Jolene, okay.
But people would always read it Jolene.
Oh, okay.
Even though it's a Y and not a E.
Yeah.
Same thing. Probably bugs your mom like crazy.
Oh, she hates it, yeah. Okay.
We'll make sure Raylan's wearing the shirt that says you can have him, Jolene.
There you go. So prayer, at least in the Hebrew, athar, is to pray or to supplicate. And here's like other definitions, is to answer, to entreat, to listen, to supplicate, to respond. So it has the spectrum of words of both listening or hearing or responding to asking and questioning.
Right.
It's a conversation.
Exactly.
It simply means to have a conversation.
And that's where I had to land.
Yeah.
But yeah, so men, regardless, at some point they either are completely invalidated in what they're going through by their father, or his response is untrustworthy. It's funny to him, it becomes a joke.
Yeah.
Or it is it's met with anger.
Right.
To the point that's like, well, not doing that again.
Yeah.
Which certainly was more of where I landed. It's like, it's not lying if you don't tell him about it. And I really was a very good person. I was just, I was a liar, a thief.
Don't get into the
oh gosh, Ray Comfort. I told you I went through one of his, a 4-hour Ray Comfort, immediate event. Like, this is how you evangelize.
That's purgatory to me.
Oh, it was, looking back, it was bad.
Not even purgatory. That's like hell. That's like,
there is no hell.
If I believed in an eternal hell, that's where I would be like listening to Ray Comfort. That would be my personal hell. Also, it's like crack to me. I remember one time there was a season where we had cable, and I would watch TBN. And what's funny though is Lacey would come home from work. This was when I was in Bible school, so I would do school and homework, and then I would watch TBN. But it was like crack to me. I would be on the couch with the remote, and Lacey would walk in, and I'm laying down, spread out on the couch, and I'm like, turn it off! Turn it off! And she's like, why do you do this? I'm like, I'm addicted to it, but turn it off!
Yeah, no, I hate televangelists.
Yeah!
And nowadays they're actually kind of good.
I know. They're tricky.
I know. Chelsea.
They almost touch your emotions, and you're like,
no, that's not what I mean. I mean like it's a good production.
oh, they've always been pretty good. Who's the guy that started TBN? Trinity Broadcasting Network. It was.
I have no idea.
He had.
I know of him. I don't remember whose name.
He had a degree. Oh, there's a really good movie docudrama on him. It's the movie's name is the name of his wife. I forget what it is. Anyways, it's really good.
After Left Behind, I just kind of walked away from Christian media.
He had a degree in. See, that's what I mean is like crack to me. I have to watch it, and yet every time I end up like laying on the couch in this drugged out state.
So my favorite Christian media of all time that I'm rewatching right now because Garen's the right age is the original Superbook from the early 80s.
Yes!
It's all on YouTube.
Did you ever get into Salty? The Blue Hymnal?
Nope, never saw that one. But so TBN would broadcast Superbook, but I didn't even realize that Superbook was actually that's a Japanese production that TBN acquired. So that was like an independent evangelism thing that became TBN.
Yeah.
They hit so hard. Like they're not pulling any punches with this stuff. Like the voice acting's terrible, but Abraham's like, I'm sorry, Isaac, God wants your blood, and I'm like, this is for like 5-year-olds. And the way they did the Adam and Eve story, I was like, okay, that's awesome. I had an Unseen Realm reference that I was going to use, but I've forgotten it now.
It was Matt and Laurie Crouch.
Okay. So it's Laurie, that's what it's called?
No, hold on. That's what I'm trying to... It genuinely is a really good... It's a secular... production. But... Movie on the founder of... I'm trying to find it because I want to recommend it. Yeah, it's a really good. It based on, let's see here. Man, who's the girl with the big frizzy hair?
Farrah Fawcett.
No, Christian. TBN Christian.
No idea.
You're not helping.
No, listen, I never had cable.
I didn't have cable either. It was like 2 years of our marriage. That's it. We didn't have a TV for the majority of our marriage.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so good for you.
We actually gave that up when we moved here. Texas corrupted me.
Oh, whatever. Start. I don't know how you ever made it in Alaska without a TV. I'm like, what are we going to do for the next 6 months? I don't know. Talk?
I will say a lot of babies are born in August.
I bet. Mm-hmm. Sounds like my kind of place. I had a thought, though.
That is a reason we did move here is we got super sad in like January, February, March. Sad, like seasonal affect disorder.
Those are the best months here because it's cold, but it doesn't last.
I know.
All right.
So good. Sorry, well, your thought. I'm going to keep looking for this because it's so good.
Just trying to bring it back in because we've got the field here. But
yeah,
fathers are important and you should love them.
And process them.
But process them, right?
Yeah.
But no, it's that acceptance that
that was like just a super over generalization.
Your perspective, I promise you, is not what happened. That was one of the key points, and I know there's been a lot of key points, but through that understanding process, I had just like the way I remember Bible verses that don't exist.
Yeah.
And live by them.
Right.
So for those of you who have not heard that story, I was very confident that there was a Bible verse that said that you are to be perfect just as Christ was perfect.
Yeah.
Which is very similar to a Bible verse that does exist.
Right.
But it's certainly, that one is, you are to be a perfect people as the Lord your God is perfect, right? Yeah. And it's an Old Testament reference that's referenced in the New Testament.
Yep.
And it is absolutely a kind of a commentary on the way you should live your life. That's not the same thing as you're becoming like Christ with the total goal of being, if I try hard enough, I can be perfect, which is how I took that non-existent verse to heart. So when I didn't measure up on a daily basis, sometime an hourly basis,
Yeah.
there was a lot of self-incrimination, right?
Yeah.
Condemnation.
Condemnation.
Incrimination that
Yeah.
leads to condemnation.
Yeah.
But we have to extend that same kind of examination to the relationships, right? Because from my 13-year-old perspective, what my dad was going through was all about me. Why is he doing this to me, right? It wasn't, I could try shutting up. And I'm not saying like, once again, not letting him off the hook here.
Yeah.
But I wasn't the best version of me, and he wasn't the best version of him. And being able to look back and say, okay, he was under a tremendous amount of pressure. He was going through a very serious depression, health changes that he didn't understand. And frankly, we couldn't afford to go to a good doctor to understand collectively.
Right.
Did I extend any grace? How did I make his life easier? I didn't.
Yeah.
So having the character to look back at that relationship with perspective and admit maybe I had some control. There's absolutely cases where there's no control. I do not want anybody to think that I'm like, if you had just not been a punk, your dad wouldn't have abused you. Not saying
no. What you're referring to, Lacey says this really well, where she says her and her siblings lived in completely different families.
Yes.
That you can tell a story, and I've done this, me and my brothers, where I'll tell a story and they're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And Lacey could tell a story and her siblings would be like, no, that's not what happened. This is what happened. And it's just simply, I mean, this from evidence and stuff like that, where it's like, you can have witnesses of a crime tell completely different stories.
You can. Which is why you never interview them together.
But what I'm saying is, and I'm offering best case scenario.
No, I know what you're doing.
Your perspective is your perspective. Perspective becomes your reality, but may not be the reality.
Right. And so my oldest sister's 8 years older than me.
Yeah.
She was leaving the house when my dad had a stroke.
Yeah.
And was in college for most of the worst years.
Yeah.
Of his
my oldest brothers are the same way with my dad.
So she understands what happened. She didn't experience it.
Right.
For her, he was the sweetest guy on earth who went through a hard time, but he came through it.
Yeah.
Right. And that's true.
Right.
She was not on the receiving end. My youngest sister, who's 2 years older than me. Whew,
yeah.
That was rough.
Yeah.
And there was a point when I was 16, I think, where she was living at home again or fixing, I don't remember. Maybe I was a little older. I don't remember. Mm-hmm. At some point, I remember I talked to you about that backhand ability he had.
Yep.
So he got her because she was up in his face about something, totally provoked it. Knowing him, she provoked it, right?
Right.
But afterwards, I remember going to him and being like, hey, I love you. I respect you. You're my dad. I'm never going to let you do that again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I said, I need you to understand what I'm saying here. I'm going to physically prevent you from doing that again.
Right.
And I don't remember him responding at all.
Yeah.
And I didn't push it. I just, he was in his room.
Yep.
Probably nearly dying from a blood pressure episode because that's just where he was.
Yeah.
And I left it there. I don't think we ever spoke about it.
Yeah.
There was just this clear understanding that I'm 6'4", 260 pounds. You're 5'8" and 200 pounds. Let's
dying.
Let's not push this.
Yeah.
And I don't think that was a wrong of me to do that because this is right on the edge of him changing, of him accepting, trusting God in a way that he hadn't in years. This is days, months, weeks before that happens.
Yeah.
But right on the edge of it. So that 4 years later, he is a man that is able to support me as I'm making some terrible relationship choices that turned into a long and successful marriage. Yeah. Right. Like, so, I mean, like basically a Hallmark movie. Yeah. That's my life.
Exactly.
Which I know you're a Hallmark movie fan.
I actually am.
I know you
I
are.
mocked it for years, and then like our entire family this last vacation that we went on ended up watching Hallmarks the entire time.
Here's the deal.
Phenomenal.
People are always like, I have so much trouble sleeping. And I'm like, what do you watch?
Yeah.
Oh, I watched pick a crime drama.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, so you like just totally fill your mind with happiness and then try to sleep.
Yeah.
I bet people that watch, like, all they have is the Hallmark Channel.
Sleep like babies.
They sleep like babies. I'm convinced.
This is usually the telltale sign that something's desperately wrong in someone's life. I will say that I'm the exception, though. I love crime dramas. Sleep like a baby.
Oh, no.
But I don't recommend that, and I don't think everyone's like that. My wife's absolutely not. My wife and one daughter cannot watch anything with a slight hint of conflict in it before bedtime. Otherwise, they're just off. They're done.
Yeah.
The Eyes of Tammy Faye. That's the movie.
Say it again.
The Eyes of Tammy Faye.
The Eyes of Tammy Faye.
Highly recommend it.
Okay, I vaguely remember this.
Yeah.
Now
Tammy Faye, the Baker story. Jimmy and Tammy Faye Baker.
Nope.
Huge scandal in TBN history. Anyways,
Was he a murderer?
No, it was financial.
Okay, so it
was financial.
The one movie that I really remember, it was Robert Duvall. It's either The Apostle or The Disciple.
Both of them sound familiar.
But he's a preacher.
Yeah.
Who has an affair, ends up killing a guy, and goes on the run.
Okay.
And somehow ends up becoming like a revival pastor.
Is it a true story?
It is a true story.
What?
Or based on a true story. License taken.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Great.
And
yeah.
Anyway, so but behind closed doors, he's this terrible person.
Yeah.
And ultimately has an actual experience with God, and takes his lumps. Goes back and faces judgment. And I remember watching it way too young in life, and it's pretty scandalous actually. But just imagine a televangelist. And Robert Duvall nailed it.
To your point, and I think we've talked about this. We can't. I joke. Christian movies produced by Christian companies are like crack to me. I think The Chosen is the first genuine movie where I'm like, or show, I'm like, yes. Everything else is more like
Passion.
Oh, yes. No. Nope. This is where I disagree. So, Christian production companies, I feel like do a terrible job outside of, that's what I'm saying, outside of The Chosen. Here's the hard part. The Passion, not a Christian production company. Eyes of Tammy Faye. There's so many other ones where I'm like, oh, they do a great job. They do such a great job because they're not bound by everything has to be a Hallmark movie wrapped up like a sitcom. Everything's wrapped up by the end of the movie. There's other ones where it's like Father John, I think it is. Super crass movie. Like incredibly, it is not a family movie by any stretch of the imagination, but it's this guy's story. It's a rough story, and it's told really rough.
Mark Wahlberg?
Yes.
Okay. That looks like a comedy, but I know it's not.
It's not. It is not. It's a rough movie, and really, if you're into hearing people's stories, me and Lacey love biographies.
Yeah, it's addictive.
But we also watch biographies going, I wonder what their story is. Like, I wonder how we could have... Because her and I are in freedom ministry, right? So her and I, we always walk into it, like the Elvis Presley story, the Bohemian Rhapsody, which is Queen. What's the main lead singer of Queen?
It wasn't his real name.
No. But anyways, we're always watching these biographies. Freddie Mercury. Going, oh, if he would have just processed this, he wouldn't be that. And so we're always watching, like I said, Elvis, all these. Eyes of Tammy Faye, this Father John.
Father Ted?
No, Father Ted.
That was
Irish.
That's right.
That's an
right.
Irish comedy. Hilarious. No, but we watch these going, oh, I wonder if they would have just processed.
Side note, what's the deal? Like, priests in Ireland solve mysteries? This is a consistent theme running back 50, 60 years now.
Without being able to disparage the Catholic Church, I don't want to answer that.
But I'm like, what's going on in Ireland that the priests, like, we've got nothing better to do? We're going to solve mysteries for the police. And nuns are getting in on it too now?
I will say living in Ireland gave me a huge disgust for the Catholic Church.
I bet.
Yeah.
It's good to be a king, right?
Because I also have a deep appreciation for the Catholic Church. My history teacher in Bible school really helped me not just villainize the Catholic Church. Kind of like why are they doing what they're doing today?
Yeah.
And it's based on actual legitimate things in history. I'll say it that way. Obviously, things always tend to get corrupted.
And banking.
Anyways.
No, you know me. I mean, like,
Yeah.
I heard it said once, I think Jim Joyner said it very early on in my relationship with him, where he was like, the Catholic Church, he felt like was the first counterfeit to Christianity.
Yeah. Yeah.
And by no means am I saying that there's not Christians within Catholicism.
Yeah.
But the structure.
Well, this goes to, I literally have to get going. In the last 2 minutes of our conversation, a quick synopsis of cults. I think genuine believers and followers of Jesus, real Christians, can be in cults.
Absolutely.
However, cults are not Christian.
Right.
And what I mean is those who claim to be a Christian denomination. Jehovah's Witness, Catholicism, Mormons. There's so many other Church of God. Not Church of God.
Church of Christ.
No, it's like Children of God, maybe was it?
Oh, there's so many more out there than I thought.
Yeah, what I'm saying is there's these cults that I believe genuine followers of Jesus are in them because they're genuinely searching out for a relationship with the living God.
Right.
The structure, the organizations are evil.
Yeah. No, that needs to be a podcast one day.
Yeah.
So anyway, process, deal with your father, Nathan.
I'll try.
And, for those out there that maybe you weren't raised by your father, this works for grandfathers.
Well,
Probably a book I need to do.
no, and that's the thing is people say, well, I didn't have a relationship with my biological dad. That's the person that you should probably process then. There's a reason if you don't have a relationship with your biological dad, there's a reason you should process that.
That has been Chelsea's biggest struggle on that particular subject. She's like, I never knew him.
Exactly.
And she's like, I don't know what to write. I don't think, just write. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Leave it blank. But do it. And, she's just not there yet.
No, I know. No, and that's the thing. And anyone who's like, oh, I just don't know. It's not like we're going to badger you, but it's just recognizing, hey, this is a hurdle. This is a hurdle.
You need to go back there periodically and check in.
Yeah.
Because it is, it was kind of like when we were counseling that guy and he said something. It was like, it wasn't that big of a deal. And we're like, oh, no.
Yeah.
That's a huge deal.
Yeah. Yep.
Not normal, not acceptable.
Correct.
Let's deal with that.
Yep.
And it opened the door to everything else. So,
love it.
Well, dude, Nathan, thank you so much for joining me on your podcast.
I always appreciate coming in as a guest. I really enjoy that. Thank you for having me.
No,
yeah,
absolute. Anytime.
All right. Yeah, I like that. Hey, goodbye.
That was fun.
That is fun. That one is going to be a long one, but a fun one.
I'll break it up into 2. 3 hours and 27 minutes.